meeting, and it's special, I believe, because it was rescheduled. Is that right, Karen?
Correct.
Okay. And tonight is Tuesday, September 14th. Okay, first item on the agenda is public comments. Do we have anything, Karen? Any emails or anything?
I did not receive any.
Okay. Then we'll go to item 2, which is Administrative Officer, Director of Finance report. Mr. Genovese. Is he with us?
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Tom. Okay.
So I have your year-end results, our preliminary year-end results, which is a surplus of $216,000, which gives us a fund balance of $6.7 million and is about 13.5%. So I wanted to just go through some of the revenues and expenditures that led to that surplus. First, on the revenue side, and there's a spreadsheet here which is part of the package, which I think is explains visually what occurred during the year. You'll see property taxes were pretty much on budget at about a slight surplus of $14,000, considering we collected almost $47 million. To have a surplus of $14,000, I think is pretty accurate. If you recall, this budget was created during the COVID, and so there were a lot of unknowns going into this budget. We didn't know what it was going to look like at the school. And whether there were going to be some talk of a deficit there. We didn't know what the programming was going to be like. Would we need money in recreation? If you remember, we had this discussion. So come out with a surplus, I think actually we did very well, and all the departments did very well. To continue, the department charge is also very close, slight surplus of $38,000. In intergovernmental revenue, we had a $148,000 surplus. Most of that was due to COVID money and FEMA money that we received to reimburse us for costs. And the flip side, we did see a significant deficit of investment income of 140. So those sort of balance each other out. So our total revenues only had a slight surplus of $50,000. So our revenues were pretty accurate this particular year. If you go to our expenditures, you'll notice that there's a expenditure surplus of $600,000, and this is where we had some differences to budget. And there's a common theme in many of the departments. In the human services, for example, and in the library, there was some questions of how to time the return of programming and when funding would be necessary and how much funding. And as it turned out, in each department, human services had an $82,000 surplus, and library $34,000, primarily related to staffing and the when the programs were started, in some cases not started at all or much later than anticipated. So and that of course has an impact on benefits, because when you have savings in wages, you have savings in benefits. There were some other areas where we had some savings in the building official, as $30,000 due to savings in wages in that department. And the Woodbridge Board of Education had a surplus of $64,000. So that's a big change from the reported deficit that we possibly had in January or February. So as a result, you'll see we have a $216,000 actual surplus. That's a addition to our fund balance. So the visual part here is every year in our budget we have a $400,000 designation from our fund balance. So you can see how it flows through, and it creates a surplus of $200,000. If you can see that visually on the spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. Considering there was a lot of unknowns at the beginning of the year, I think the year turned out very well.
I'd just like to comment that EMD shown as 0. Needless to say, that's because that's the way it should be. But however, we all are going to we know that there's a significant amount of money coming back to Woodbridge from EMD that won't show up on this report, but you'll be hearing about it when the audit is complete. So that's in addition to this.
Right, because we paid them. That doesn't come in until
They got
the
their
year
money,
after. Right.
They got a return.
Right.
Okay. Any questions on any of this for Tony? Okay. Status of the 20 audit, Tony.
RSM has been in for their preliminary review. They've done all of their testing. They've done all of they test basically our payroll transactions. They test our accounts payable transactions. They'll test our some of our grant expenditures. They'll go through, and what they're doing is they take a statistically representative sample, and then they test for controls. They'll test for proper approvals. They'll test to make sure that salaries are what they're supposed to be. They'll test for a whole bunch of different things. And if they don't find anything, they finish their testing. In the event they find something, then they test more. So each time they find something that's not correct, they'll test more. But we didn't have any findings. And so that went well. They also do walkthroughs, which is basically they walk through all of our procedures from IT to revenue to payroll to make sure that what we're doing is has the controls on it and to make sure that it's proper procedure. So they've done all that work, and they come out on the 27th of September for about 3 weeks to do the actual audit. At that point, we'll give them our trial balance and all of our backup, and they will audit our financial statements. So that's where we are.
Okay. Proposed budget meeting dates, Tony?
Is that
We
in the
don't need
package?
to vote on these. These are just for you to review to make sure you'll
Okay.
be available and to put on your calendars. We'll vote next month.
Okay. And the Woodbridge financial report, Tom, you want to cover this when you're liaison?
Yes, I'll do that.
A funding request. Let's see here. There's just one, Tony, is that right? It's line item transfer 212202, and it's to transfer grant funds received from Area 2 Cable Advisory Council to budget for Woodbridge Government Access TV. So I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 212202 in the amount of $23,120.
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions on this? It's kind of just a transfer of monies into the budget, so. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Donovan, are you there?
Yep.
You're a yes? Donovan?
Aye.
Okay. Next is approval of minutes, 2 sets. The first is the regular board meeting on July 15th, and I will move acceptance of the minutes of July 15th as presented.
I'll second
Second.
that.
Discussions or corrections or adjustments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Donovan, you there? Okay. And August 19th. That was a quick meeting we had to make a couple of funding requests. So I will move acceptance of the minutes of Thursday, August 19th as presented.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay. I doubt there's any questions. We all approve that. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Ellen?
I abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. All right.
As do I, Matt, Tom.
Okay. All righty. Let's get organized here. Budget guidelines, Tony, go ahead.
So I want to just have a discussion about budget guidelines. We are this time of year where we're putting together our capital budget package, and our operating budget packages will be out the next month or so. And so I just wanted to see if the board had any budget guidelines or any anything you want me to relay to our department heads to give them some guidance when preparing their budget. Any particular information that you're looking for? One thing I could that could suggest is possibly, what suggestions do the departments have? Should they be requested to have a zero increase budget? In other words, most departments have staff increases, and so what would be some programmatic reductions that would be made in the department? I mean, that's just a suggestion.
Mhm.
There could be others. I know sometimes there's, no position increases, no position adds, or there could be different guidelines, but I don't know if
I
anyone
think,
has.
I think we always ask them for, as close to zero as they can get. And if not, present their budget that they feel is necessary, and then perhaps give us some ideas about what they would have to do to get to zero. Again, the unfair part of this, if unfair is the right word, is that all the other departments have to do this, and education comes in with their numbers, and that's their numbers. So it's, as I said at the town meeting, over the past 5 years or 6 years, all our other departments are actually operating with less money than they did 5 or 6 years ago. So
That's true.
it's a constant battle to try and keep the budget under control, but it seems like we battle on the backs of all the other departments while the education gets what they need. So something to think about.
If you don't have a grand list growth, and
Right.
you don't have other revenues growing like grants, and you don't cut education, there's only one other place to go, and that's the town departments.
Yeah, exactly.
So, given some of the meetings we've had this year, Tony, your suggestion perhaps is a good one, so that people who are thinking they'd like to see zero growth in the different departments have at hand what that would look like.
Correct. That's
Uh,
the idea, right?
and I
You want to
think
see a zero growth in the library? Okay, well maybe they're not open on Saturdays and Sundays and at the evenings.
right, right. So I would suggest that, as well as I I know last year I believe what we did was ask the departments to go ahead as if COVID were not going to be a problem. But I think we should at least talk about that, since it's very likely we're going to have COVID restrictions again, and the impact. I don't know that there's anything they can do about that, except maybe just be aware that, of course, that could be coming, and that we would appreciate their starting to think about that. As I think that's what they did last year as well.
Hmm. We can definitely do that.
So, do we need to vote on suggesting that they come up with 0% budgets, or is it enough for sort of the consensus of the board?
Yeah, I think Tony can relay the message.
I can.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else?
I don't know if we want to have a discussion now or sometime later. Just given what happened at the last, town meetings, if there's some way we can figure out how to get the message out even better, get people involved in our meetings, asking questions. I don't really have a good idea how to do it. I think we make the best attempts we can, and then people don't show up, and then we have chaos at the end. I just wanted to throw it out on the table if there's some way we can educate folks in town better about what we discuss and why we come up with the answers we do. I think we do a great job, and somehow we got to get that message out better.
Well, I know Beth has put out on a number of publications and a number of times the process and what people should be doing, can do, go to commissions, go to boards, attend the budget hearings, to be able to understand more about it. The other thing I can mention is that Karen and I have been working on a new budget, and we mentioned this a little bit last year, but it's a virtual budget. It's an online budget document that we hope to roll out in October, which provides a lot more information other than just a sheet of paper. There's interactive charts and graphs. There's links to other documents. There's different ways to. There's 10 years of history on expenditures. There's all kinds of information to be able to better understand the budget. So we can definitely roll that out as well.
And that's great. And again, I think we've had a discussion about, is there some way we can, again, indicate those items in the budget that are basically contractual. We don't really have a lot of choice over. I know it's a two-edged sword in sort of saying, here are the things you can't touch. And so everyone then focuses on the ones they can, which then gets back to, as everybody's been talking about, I think we have to make it absolutely clear that if we go in with a certain idea of, let's say, no tax increase this year, what are the ramifications to the town? And I love the idea of having an online interactive so people can actually see what's going on. I applaud you all for working on that.
Well,
Go ahead.
I just want to emphasize all that underlying information has always been available. It's not as if it's going to be available
That's
for the
true.
first time.
That's true.
It's
That is very
always
true.
been available for anybody who wants to see it, including the history. I think what it sounds like this accomplishes is that it makes it it intersects with our virtual lives in a way that perhaps has not been true before. For myself, I think that the concern this last season was as much about the process as it was about the budget, because the preliminary budget hearing, where we normally have these very vibrant exchanges, was under the radar. Only because it was virtual. The COVID rules changed and we had no choice about that. So I think we just need to be responsive in terms of making sure that people, including all of us, if we have to go in that direction again, that the public understands that that's the place to really ask your questions so that we can have a real exchange as opposed to a confrontation. Because I think that got lost in the shuffle last time. Nobody's fault. It was COVID.
I agree, and let's hope by next April we're able to, because to have a budget hearing virtually was an absolute waste of time. I think we had 2 questions, and it's just not. It doesn't work. We're gonna. Let's hope the numbers come down and we can do it, because we can't have a virtual budget hearing, virtual town meeting. Unfortunately, the point about getting people interested early on. I mean, we're going to be starting this in October, November. We're going to have a capital budget hearing, and that's the time people have to listen. They have to listen to our meetings or come to our meetings, and it's just in my 30 whatever years, it doesn't happen. People are not going to spend nights sitting in our meetings, listening to what happens. And to repeat what I've said ad nauseum is, people say, we want to cut this budget, but we have to keep education intact and so forth and so forth. Well, as I said last time, that means you got to cut $1.5 million from all the rest of the budgets. It's impossible without decimating town services. We can't cut $1.5 million from all our departments. Impossible. So, as Tony said, no grand list growth. We are at the mercy of trying to run the town and keep it functional. Without any additional revenue. It's very, very difficult. So we can make
Matt,
that
can I
statement year
ask-
after year. Go ahead.
Can I ask Tony one real quick question again?
Sure.
So is the virtual budget experience, is that going to be for both capital and operating, or just the upcoming capital?
So right now we're working on one which will be from last year's adopted budget. So
Uh-huh.
and the first one that you do is always the most time consuming, because you're building all the infrastructure around it, creating the
Right.
schedules, creating the, once we get all this, we're learning the software. So this is what takes the longest. Once we get the last year's adopted budget, up on the website, and people can go through it, and we can learn from it. Then we'll also do it for next year's. Our goal is to do it for the preliminary budget, so that we can show the preliminary budget and people can understand the preliminary budget with on the online version. It would be both capital and operating.
Got it. Thank you.
I had a follow-up question on that too. So you said it was interactive. Will you see questions and be responding to people?
I tell you what we can do. We can send a link to the board of a couple of towns that have them already, and you can look through them and you can get a flavor for what they'll be like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so just you can see, just different, big towns, small towns, and you can see, how they're designed and what types of features they have.
Okay. All right.
So is it cast in stone? Because I went to the Amity board meeting last night. Their meetings are now live. So I don't know if it's Woodbridge or I mean, we're talking November with the budget hearing, the capital budget hearing. But I mean, I'll tell you, everybody was there. I mean, we had the meeting, we wore masks, and it was a regular Amity board meeting. So I mean, we're going to do this forever. I mean, at what point do we say, okay, why don't we give it a shot? I mean, I just don't think we can continue to do this for indefinitely. There's got to be a time when we can start. I don't know what other Tony. Did you talk to other people? Are other towns all still virtual? Or are they meeting? Or you don't know?
I'm not really sure. I know it depends on the town. I think it's a little of both.
Yeah.
Towns are virtual. Some towns are live.
Well, like I said, Amity's meetings are live and went fine. So I hope we can get back to some kind of, I could deal with this meeting, but when you get to hear budget hearings and it's, to have presentations made on a computer screen, I would much rather be there and ask questions, et cetera. So we'll see where we go. It's September. The numbers were down yesterday, and of course today they're up again, the positivity rate. So let's see where we go.
Maybe we can make this meeting an exception if we, I don't know, if we can.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, let's see. Like I said, we're in September. Let's see where we go from here. I guess I take it Beth's not with us tonight. Did she tell you she wasn't coming, Karen?
Yes, she's not going to attend.
Okay.
She's
So there's
unable to.
There's no first selectmen's report?
No.
Okay. Then we'll go to liaison reports. As I said, I was at the Amity Board of Education Finance Committee meeting last night. And again, in the first report we're getting here, which is dated September 2nd, which is 2 months, they have a surplus of $453,000. Now, again, people start screaming, and we said last night, geez, and then she said, look, we approved this budget in April. We have no idea who's coming back, who's not coming. They had a bunch of retirements, several resignations. Special ed is completely different in certain areas from what they thought they were going to have. It's just not something you can put a handle on in April for the whole next year. So all these things they were anticipating in the way of staffing, in the way of benefits, in the way of special ed, et cetera, they don't happen. So that's why we already have a $453,000 surplus, and we'll see where we go from here. Nobody seemed too concerned with that 2 months in. Again, as I stated, once the audit is complete, Woodbridge will be getting back a fairly significant sum of money, which in the hundreds of thousands, probably over 800,000. And as has always been the case, Tony will come up with suggestions to use the money wisely. Again, you can't take a chunk of money and just drop it into next year's budget and reduce the budget, because if it doesn't happen the following year, you end up with a big hole in the budget. So we try and do things with it that are one-time things, and we've had good success with it, and helping the taxpayers certainly, but not reducing the budget. It's very hard to do that.
Okay.
And one last thing, the artificial turf field, a very contentious item, is done. And the first Amity football game will be played on Friday. And who knows if there will be protesters there or whatever, because there's a lot of opposition to the turf field. But it's done. It's quite attractive. I drove by it, and the kids are starting to use it and really enjoying it. So let's see what happens from here. So, and that's my report. Let me go here. Donovan, do you have anything?
Yeah, so the big takeaway from the fire station meetings were we have to be prepared for they're trying to get a fire truck, which is probably the major item on their agenda, and cost of that is probably it's like $1 million. The one they have now is, I think it's over 16 years old or something. So they're going to be pushing forward to getting a new truck. So that's probably the major thing, major takeaway there, in terms of the fire station.
Okay. As long as we're mentioning fire, I'm sure we all got a bevy of documents regarding dispatch issues and whatever. Again, it really doesn't affect us. I mean, I read through a lot of it, so I think it's something that's got to be hashed out between the police, the fire, and the town itself. So I don't know that we even have to discuss it, but it was quite interesting, I guess. Okay, who's next? Dwight.
I couldn't attend the rec commission meeting on the 23rd of August because that was my wedding anniversary.
No excuse. I'm sorry.
So I had to bug out. So that was fine. But everybody was fine. Everybody in the rec commission, they said, no, we understand. So I attended the human services meeting on August 2nd. That was in person in the center. So Center Senior Lounge. So that was good. They received a $300,000 grant for the renovation of the senior center, which we all know. So they were all happy about that, and they're going to start working on the final design and documents. They have an application they're going to submit for the YSB and enhancement grants, which was due on September 1st. The amount had not yet been figured out, but they were working on that. The job bank is looking for some help applicants for some of the youth in the high school. I guess they're kind of short. Nobody wants to work outside. Nobody wants to weed or do leaves. So just a takeaway with that. So, but it's money. So I don't know. The 7th grade held an event that was sponsored by Youth Services on August 25th for the middle school. It was held on the town green. I heard it was a big success. The programs at the senior center, well, they continue to be strong and attended well by a lot of the seniors. The computer lab reopened to seniors back on July 6th. They're limiting the use due to COVID, but it is open now for use. The annual the picnic, which was an indoor picnic, was held on July 29th with a drive-through. There were 75 meals served, and they thanked the PD for sponsoring that. They're planning to hold a few CPR, AED, first aid training sessions for the town sometime in September. And they were going to for town staff, and they were going to let everybody know. So, and they're also planning to hold Narcon training on September 1st and 2nd. So staff, so they were going to notify them. The annual flu clinic is now planned for October 21st, and that'll be held probably in the senior center on the downstairs. And then the big event is the Living Award, or the Treasure Award dinner. It's going to be held on the 23rd next week at the Woodbridge Fire Department inside the base. And they're all looking forward to that. And that's where I stand, so.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Ellen.
The police commission meeting was canceled in August. No report.
Okay. Susan.
Library Commission has a new chair, Jim Moriarty. They held elections last night. Two big issues. One issue, of course, we should all be commending the library. Week to week, every month they're trying to be responsive on programming to accommodate COVID restrictions. They're looking at restricting one kind of access and opening up another kind of access, possibly on Saturdays. That was all being discussed. The other issue, and I guess Tony knows about this, is between Henri and Ida, there was a little water in the building, but building maintenance is on top of it. I
Yes.
don't know that that's going to cost anybody any money, but they're keeping an eye on that. I gather there was a fair amount of moisture that came into the children's library through the, not clear to me if it was through the roof or the window, but that's the report.
We also had water in the senior center due to Ida.
They also have water in my basement, so, you know, it's universal.
Okay, Tom.
So the Board of Ed Finance Committee actually met just before this one. So this was my second meeting of the afternoon evening. The interim financial director seems to be doing a really great job. He has some innovative ideas. So maybe we'll see some new forms of reports that'll make it easier for all of us to and the people in town to read them. As you saw in the packet, estimating that the town will get back 64,000, which is, as we've talked about over the year, pretty amazing seeing where they started. They're in the process of doing the audit, and they don't have a lot of information because they're still, you know, the budget is 2 months in, but they just started school recently, and there's still some positions to be filled, so it's not entirely clear where the budget is going, but we will be informed at the next meeting exactly how things are looking. Good news is Extended Day is back up and running and making a profit, or at least breaking even, so that's great news. So I think we're doing well. A lot of new faces at the Board of Ed and on the Board of Ed Finance Committee, so there's going to be a lot of education going on. So far, so good.
I was reading the memo from the new finance director, and he mentioned that about the 2% of the budget that you can put into a capital and non-recurring fund. Now, I didn't think that a town board of ed could do that, and there was a discussion, if you read the letter, there was a discussion about that between the superintendent and the finance director. In other words, Amity, for example, wanted to put 2% of their budget away for, which would have been over $1 million, and we settled them on 1%. I didn't believe that Woodbridge or town boards could do that, but this gentleman seems to think they can. I'm just telling you, Tom, it's the most contentious thing that goes on in Amity, this ability to, and they have big surpluses, but this ability to put 2% of the budget away, and if they want, and it's almost an invitation to over budget so that it's there at the end of the year. I mean, Beecher has never had this problem, but in other words, they could turn around and take the 60 some odd thousand surplus and keep it and put it into a capital non-recurring budget. I would just, warn them against that. I'm just as liaison, because I mean, the town of Woodbridge has always responded to Beecher Road School's capital needs. We've always, tens and tens of millions of dollars we've spent over there. There's never been a problem. When they need something, we take care of it. So I just wanted to mention that to you.
And sorry, Matt, I should have brought it up. It did come up in the conversation this afternoon. Sheila and I were both on it. We sort of raised the issue of what was contentious over at Amity.
Yeah.
We pretty much suggested that this seems to be muddying the water unnecessarily. The finance director said that he's amazed at how well the town and the board work together. So he said maybe this is not necessary. And I think, I suspect, I'll put my foot in my mouth here, but I suspect that this will not become an issue, because I think that it was pretty clear that, that he was also talking about using it for, possibly some special ed stuff. I don't know that he was, he's new. He's trying to come to grips on what happens in town. He was pretty amazed at how the town and the school district work so well together. I suspect he are wonder whether he's been in other situations where it hasn't worked as smoothly as we do. So I don't think it's going to become an issue, but I will reiterate that going forward, that we think it would not necessarily be a good idea. And be
Okay, thank you.
Tom, I could just tell you that from my experience with other finance directors, the relationship between the town and the Woodbridge Board of Education is not the norm. That's actually quite
Absolutely. Oh,
very
absolutely.
unusual.
Absolutely. That wasn't
I
always
gathered
an
that from his
option,
discussions.
let's be honest. It's gotten that way. It's gotten better over the years. There was a time when there were certain other superintendents, I won't mention their names, it was contentious to say the least. So, no, it's gotten a lot better. So, I think Guy Stella got us started on that road. When we got Guy Stella from that.
I thought you weren't gonna mention any name.
Well, Guy Stella meant in a positive way. I mentioned his predecessor. You can look it up. Okay. Anything else? Then I will make a motion to adjourn. All those in
Second.
favor? I was told last night you don't have to second the motion to adjourn.
Oh, great.
All those in
Aye.
favor? Aye. Okay, good. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.